like I said, we want to discuss rapid charging today with a specific context for the Indian market and why the Indian market needs rapid charging. Well, I guess every market needs rapid charging, but the Indian market even more so, and how we sort of see the need for a sync between batteries and charging. So introduce ourselves. We've actually built the world's fastest charging tech on LFP. We have 15-minute rapid charging, which is 0 to 100%. And we sort of build this at a cell level, and we're cell agnostic. So we're able to use the regular LFP cells today, and we're already building a pipeline to use any ionic cell of the future. So we already have a sodium ion that's sort of being tested, and as we have better anode material, better chemistries, we intend to incorporate them into our stack. And the way we design a tech, it's modular, so it works from a small two-wheeler to a truck all the way to a larger bus. So that's our full technology stack. We have the charger called e-pump. We have our own plug, and we have the e-pack, which is the battery pack. Our e-pack is obviously sitting inside the vehicle, which is what's powering the vehicle, and the e-pump network is what you sort of walk into, recharge liquid refuel. So like you have a fuel pump, we have an e-pump. Right. A little bit of ourselves. We based out of Bangalore in India. We filed 30 plus patents for them being granted. We have 200 members, 120 of them in R&D. A lot of them building EVs for a while in India. Prior to this, I was one of the founders at Ather, and the product head at Ather. So Ather is one of the now leading manufacturer of electric two-wheeler in India. India is a big two-wheeler market, not really a four-wheeler market. So we see a lot of action in electrification here. This market is actually getting to close to 10% penetration with respect to the electric. Right. So why Exponent? While building Ather, I had a bunch of insights. I think over the last 15 to 20 years, the vehicle side of the technology has evolved to a point where it's just superior. The EVs are obviously better, they're faster, they're sexier, we all love EVs. But obviously it's energy that's slow, it's complicated, it's expensive. So it really holds you back from buying an EV. Where do I charge? How long will it take? Will my battery last? We're all quite familiar with the problem. And we think the third wave, which is getting everyone to the equipment, is no more a vehicle problem, but it's an energy problem. And when I say energy, it's not just a cell problem, but everything on top of that, which is having the right battery management system and the right charging network to efficiently use and avail energy on a daily basis. So that's how we sort of look at this as an ecosystem. Right? So some of the insights we realize obviously energy needs to be simplified. India needs a platform built in India for India. And India is a hard place, just to put in perspective. We have one of the worst temperature conditions, grid conditions, road conditions. And also, price points are very aggressive. So a lot of times we imported technology from Europe or from China. They didn't work. Either they were not reliable enough or they were too expensive. We sort of had to really think out on how to make things work here. And one of the key learnings we had is that everyone's talking about cells, but cell will sort of be a neutralizing point. Everyone will have access to its fundamentally the same cell. So if you look at cell as a commodity, then energy management, what do you do with the cell, becomes a very key aspect to the whole experience, right? You and I can buy the same cell, but the life and performance you're going to get out of the cell might be very different. And that's one of the key insights that we took, and we built a company on top of that. Is can I take any cell and give you maximum performance at maximum life? And that sort of got us to Exponent and sort of a chicken chase on to get the fastest charging and the longest time. Right? Today everyone talks about range anxiety, and a lot of companies, a lot of countries are talking about energy density. How do I give you more range? We think there's nothing called range anxiety. We think it's actually charging anxiety. Today in a gasoline vehicle, you don't really care about what a full tank gives you. There's always a network to find, top up, and keep going. That network doesn't exist for EV. That experience doesn't exist for EV. Network is the availability is poor, the reliability is poor, the charging station, the queues are long, and the charging time by itself is quite long. So we need to fix this entire equation. If we can get rapid, reliable, and dense charging, then everyone will go electric, and we think everyone will stop worrying about range. Right? And the other context is India can't afford large batteries, right? Just to give you a comparison, if I look at and you can do this comparison in any segment, but if I look at an average of 2-ton truck uh, in India versus a 2-ton truck, the US example, you notice the price point is almost one third, um, and that sort of represents the average price point. An average vehicle in India is one third to one fourth that of a US or a European counterpart, uh, which means we just can't afford large batteries. The other reality is India sort of parks on the road. A lot of, I think, highly dense cities in the world, and India sort of, a lot of cities in India are up there on the list. They all park on the road. So you can't actually uh, charge overnight. You can't park at home and charge overnight, right? So while the rest of the world is chasing energy density, which is how do I give you 400, 500, or maybe 1,000 kilometer range vehicles? You're going to park at home, you're going to charge at home. Public charging is during highways, during road trips. So, even 1 hour charging is good enough. We realize in India, people are going to use rapid charging every day. So, which means even 1 hour is too slow. It needs to be sub 10 minutes. And on the other end, India can't afford large batteries. So, you need small batteries with ultra fast charging. So, sort of power density becomes really the most important thing to chase for India. And someone else in the introduction section talked about how there is no one cell chemistry that works for all applications. And we think similarly, while you have a particular cell, how you deploy it and how you manage it, I don't think there's one particular way to do it. So we're sort of taking a power density first approach in taking a cell and sort of extracting maximum power density. Yep, so that's what we believe. We believe we need rapid charging, reliable public network, and dense public network. Right? Let's pause here for a brief minute. This is the first time doing this. Any questions? Happy to answer. Sort of deep dive more into the technology.
Yeah, I think one of the things for the fast charge times is, and again, this is purely for United States issue, but vehicles tend to be very large and batteries tend to be very high kilowatt hour capacity. So would one of the strategies be to have smaller vehicles, like for example, like BYD Seagull, I think is a great product for mass production and affordability. So in addition to the technology you just went over, I think having more appropriately sized vehicles makes like exceptional fast charging much more feasible, I suppose. Or I guess, are you looking primarily at reducing the total kilowatt hours of the battery pack, or is that somewhat independent of what your technology is trying to achieve?
Yeah, uh, we think that's the end result, and I completely agree. But I think people will only be comfortable with smaller battery sizes if we solve for range, for charging anxiety, which means enough network points, reliable network points, and very quick in and out times. And that's what we sort of proven in our city. So this is obviously a very geographically linked problem, and we need to build densities up in every network. But once we've done that, we're easily able to get people to live with 30 to 35% smaller batteries. Which
Right.
you're right, which actually then makes fast charging even easier. So it's sort of a snowball where we sort of set up the initial network, get people to live with smaller network points, smaller chargers, and batteries, and then helps us scale up the infrastructure.
Yeah, because I know another really, I think a really good business model. Again, this is not for the markets in the United States, but like in Taiwan, for example, I forget what the company is called, but they have those motorcycles where you can swap the battery at a charge station, and it's like a subscription based, right? Because in that way, you never really have to
Yeah,
worry
you're
about
talking
range.
Gogoro.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's probably, I think for very dense cities, I think that's probably the best business model because range is never an issue, right? You just swap the battery.
Yeah, so I'll sort of touch upon that. So swap doesn't really solve the problem. Swap's a operational band-aid, which is saying, hey, come in, I'll swap your battery out, and you keep going. But then the battery still takes a long time to charge up in the dock, right? So while swap sounds like a great idea on paper, the first couple of vehicles have it quick, and then you quickly run out of batteries at the back end, which means you don't really, the third or fourth person that turns up is actually waiting a long time. So if you really want to scale this up, you have to charge batteries quickly. There's no escaping that problem.
Yep. No, I agree. That makes sense.
So, yeah, so maybe I'll set more context on the market we focus on. We focus on commercial vehicles in India. They're 10% vehicles, 70% energy. So very different energy pie compared to the US, where it's mostly passenger vehicles that consume most of the power. Passenger four wheelers. If you look at India, PV, which is the passenger four wheeler market, consumes very little energy compared to trucks and buses and three wheelers. India also has this concept of a three wheeler, which is a unique market, right? So to solve for this, we realized, this is not a single-sided problem. We just can't build battery technology that, charges in 15 minutes in a lab. Uh, and also, there's no point just setting up high-power chargers if there's nothing to charge. So we really have to solve for this two-sided. And we also realized energy is transforming. Uh, you know, uh, in petroleum, energy was an upstream problem, where the transaction is a commodity, right? Here, the upstream is actually a commodity. There's energy in my wall already. How do I take energy from the wall to the vehicle? That's the fundamental problem. And if you sort of look at this entire energy supply chain, right? In the IC world, oil companies sort of discovered petroleum, extracted it, refined it, distributed it. The transaction of petroleum is obviously very easy. It's simple, dumb mechanical process. And on the OEM side, companies focused on powertrain technology, which is really hard actually. Everyone did their job. But when it comes to EVs, actually the upstream is already commoditized. There's grid, there's distribution, there's energy in the wall. Motor technology is fairly commoditized already. You have enough cell option. It's actually the in between. How do I take energy from the wall to the cells quickly? How do I charge 100 cells up very quickly, efficiently, safely? This it's sort of this middle layer that's broken. Today in a lot of open protocols, you have a charger built by company A, it's installed and operated by company B. Company C is making the cell. Company D is building the batteries. Company E is probably building the vehicle. So when the vehicle turns up at the charging station, chargers and batteries fundamentally don't understand each other, which is sort of what leads to a whole bunch of confusion around how to charge, when to charge. You end up taking a very simplistic approach to charging, which leads to slow charging and short battery life. This impacts everyone. Charge point operators don't make money. OEMs have to sell larger vehicles with larger batteries, and that's the negative flywheel. And end users bear the brunt. So that's what we want to solve, and that's what we created rapid charging for: 15-minute rapid charging, 3,000 cycles warranty. Uh, so maybe I'll just talk about our tech. And yeah, to solve rapid charging, we have to solve these two problems, which is lithium plating and extreme heat. Maybe we'll focus on each of them to start with. Obviously, every cell's got a cathode and an anode. We all know that. The faster you charge, we realize there's more ions, more lithium crowding, which is when a cell is polarized state. Uh, if you continue stressing the cell out in the state, you fundamentally have lithium plating, which is bad for multiple reasons. You've lost active lithium. It's irreversible. Your capacities drop. Your internal resistances are going up. And third, what we also realize is the available anode surface material comes down, which means the probability of plating crowding only goes up every cycle. So it's sort of a negative snowball effect. So we need to attack this at the root cause, eliminate lithium plating altogether. That's why we sort of use three aspects: a BMS, a virtual cell model, and a dynamic charging algorithm. So we don't do CCCV. Sort of get to why that's important. Uh, right? So compared to the industry average of a 20 millivolt sensing, we have sub 2 millivolt sensing in accuracy, which is very critical for LFP, considering how flat the slope is. Uh, right. So the BMS obviously is only useful from point of view of voltage, current, temperature. What we make out of that is where we have the virtual cell model, where we're actually able to uh, sort of real time predict what's happening with every cell. We're computing lithium crowding in real time, which gives us a sense of how stressed a cell is and what we can do. So while charging, if you ever sense a cell is lithium crowded, and we sort of predicting this, basic using voltage, current, temperature, transient characteristics, we course correct the charging current real time to ensure that no cell is stressed at any point of time. Right. So this ensures that every cell is charged really quickly without the risk of lithium drain. Right. The other bit is thermals. So the step one is to ensure we can charge the cell up without damaging it. Step two is thermals, and that's where with rapid charging, there's a lot of heat that gets generated. When you go from 1 hour charging to 15-minute charging, the heat is 2 to 6 times more on average, assuming resistance are almost the same. Uh, and that's a lot of heat. And obviously, if you don't cool it, obviously the cell's going to heat up. It's going to hit temperature cutoffs, and in barely going to be able to get any charging done. The other thing is everyone talks when I talk about cooling, everyone talks about liquid cooling. But that doesn't really cut it. In engines, you have the engine is at 90 degrees Celsius, you have 40 degrees Celsius, the heat transfers quite easily with basic liquid cooling. That doesn't work for EVs. You want the cell between 25 to 35. Your ambience at 40. So you actually need HVAC, right? And we realized uh, if you look at most vehicles, if you look at the charge time, you're able to get through the first 50% within 15 minutes, or 12 minutes, or 18 minutes. Firstly, that's not fast enough. Secondly, all these vehicles actually have onboard track systems, which actually cost quite a lot. This doesn't work again for a segment like India because the average price points of the vehicles are really low. Like the average price point of three wheelers $1,800, right? So there's really no place to put a hatchback system, which would actually cost another $1,000 into this, right? So we actually asked the other thing we realized is uh, the heat generated while driving is so little, while the heat generated while rapid charging is a lot. You're taking 3 to 4 hours. Your average discharge rate is 0.3 C. So it's the amount of heat generated is very little while driving. So you barely heat up the battery while driving in India. It's actually while rapid charging is mostly heat generated. We asked ourselves, why do you actually need HVAC systems while driving? You only need them while charging, right? So we actually took the HVAC system from the vehicle and transferred it to the charger. So we have this off-board charging technology. So we're able to actually, while we connect a connector, we actually pump in liquid, uh, and we're able to extract the heat from the battery very efficiently without adding weight and cost to the vehicle. Because the weight and the cost now on the charger and it's sort of shared across hundreds of vehicles, it becomes far more efficient as a business and far more efficient as a technology and far more scalable from a price point and a weight perspective. So whether it's a 0 degrees Celsius or a 50 degrees Celsius, we're able to ensure the batteries in the thermal sweet spot. All the cells are at the right temperature points. And we also have a preheating condition, which means when you come in and it's 0 degrees Celsius, we heat you up and then we cool you. And let's say you have 50 degrees Celsius, we pre-cool you to 25 degrees Celsius and then we start managing the temperature. Right? And so this tech is now being tested. We got 3,000 cycles tested. We only saw every cycle is a rapid charging cycle. So this is not a simulation that actually took us 12 months to test every cycle. We average 10 cycles a day. The advantage of rapid charging is we can also test more cycles in a given day. We do an average 1C discharge, so 4C charge on average, and we're able to do 3,000 cycles testing. And we saw a 12% SOH degradation on a regular LFP cell. So we realized the combination, so it's not just a cell, we're able to take a regular cell, add our BMS, a charging algorithms, thermal management, and deliver much more performance, much more life. And that in some sense is our core vision for Exponent, and to always amplify cell, right? Why do we believe in dynamic charging current? Because we believe CCCV, for example, is one of the worst things to do to a cell. What we're doing in CCCV is actually just dumping constant amount of current for X amount of time. So you're just bombarding the anode with lithium ions no matter what. You don't really care about what's happening with the cell. And in the constant voltage range, you're just literally keeping constant voltage and letting this current decay. So you're literally letting the cell decide how much to eat, right? So you're sort of oversaturating the cell, and cells are fairly dumb at the end of the day. They're canned with chemicals. So I think depending on material science alone is very limiting. Like I said, material science is great. We need to constantly evolve and iterate on materials. But depending on just materials, I think is fairly outdated. everything in the world today has more electronics, more software, more active management. So we think with energy and with cells as well, we need a more active management system to extract maximum life and performance of a cell. So which is why we believe in a dynamic charge current. We never actually hit CV. We are always in current control. Right? So we actually believe every cell has a long life. It's just that because we don't manage it well, we end up getting, even with regular slow charging, we get much lesser life. And of course, if you recklessly rapid charge, you just blindly charge a cell, of course, it will die in a few hundred cycles. And which is where Exponent's technology is about how do you extract maximum cell life while going really, really fast. Right? And of course, there's a lot of new cell chemistries coming in. We have 5C cells, right? 5C rated cells. And here, a 5C cell rated cell is still a 35 to 40 minute charge because 5C is just what you can do for a short period. You can't actually sustain that performance for a long time. Exponent's tech is actually figuring out how to sustain that for a really, really, really long time. So we're able to use a regular cell and give you 15-minute charging. And of course, when we get 5C cells, which are commercially viable, we want to go faster, which means hopefully we'll get to sub 10 minutes and sub 5 minute charging. So to a future of 5 minute charging. Right? And our journey so far in the field, we sort of pushed out this sort of product. The three-wheeler, like I said, is a unique form factor in India. These vehicles charge in 15 minutes. We got 1,500 vehicles. We've done close to 200,000 charging stations now. So now testing this in the field for the last 1.5 to 2 years, 18 months of sorts on Indian roads. We sort of set up these chargers across the city. There's a roadside, curbside charging opportunities. So drivers come, charge up, they love it. Obviously, drivers see a lot more traction, a lot more revenue, a lot more uptime. Commercial vehicles is all about constantly driving and constantly sweating the asset. And of course, one of the big advantages also is now with every charging station, we're seeing 20 plus charging stations a day. So our charging stations are very profitable. In comparison, on the same piece of land, another charging station is only charging 2 or 3 vehicles on a day. We're charging 20 vehicles a day because of rapid charging. So the great thing with rapid charging is sort of win-win for everyone. Obviously, for the end user, it's unlimited uptime, unlimited flexibility, smaller batteries, lower cost. While for charging stations, make the charging stations more profitable, more efficient. So we think, this two-sided sync-up approach is very critical to sort of really ensuring that we can all go electric sustainably.
Hi, Arun. I just have
Yeah,
a
I'll take a pause.
quick question. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on how dynamic charging helps extend the life of the battery? I just don't come in from a very technical field, so if you could maybe just explain it to me like I'm 5.
Yeah. So again, if I just go back to the whole cell, so we just go back to smart meter. Right. So if you just fundamentally look at a cell, you have a cathode and anode, right? So when you charge, you have lithium ions that go from the cathode, get anode like a foam-like substance. So obviously, on one end, you have material science innovations to improve the anode structure, different types of materials to help better absorption, better rate of absorption. But let's say I give you a anode material, and that's the same. What we realized is how you control the current profiles can really change absorption rates and absorption concentration, lithium ion concentration. So when you think of this as like a Tetris, right? So when you're charging, when you charge more, you have more current, which means you have more lithium ions, but you only have a limited amount of surface on the anode, which leads to lithium crowding, right? So we realized that if you can sense so when a cell is lithium crowded, it's a polarized state, and you can sort of look at data and look at transient profiles, you can sort of figure out when we realize that if you actually let a cell depolarize, which is either you switch off current or you reverse current or you reduce current, you're actually letting the cell sort of take a breather, and you're letting the anode absorb what is unabsorbed. Right? So that's sort of to loosely put how changing currents ensures that there's no stack up, right? Lithium crowding is okay; it's reversible, but lithium plating is irreversible. So the point is to know when you're in the lithium crowding state and sort of bring it back to safer regions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Just a quick follow up. So that breather that you talked about, is that driven by heat essentially of how much of a breather the cathode and the anode needs, or is there something else that drives that?
No, that's driven by current. Current. So you only control current.
Okay.
So we have negative current, which means you actually can discharge like a micro discharge cycle, right? To actually reverse. Imagine just reversing this flow of lithium ions the other way around, right? So that's negative current is actually the best. So imagine while charging, you're giving a positive current to the cell. You can actually do a few negative current pulses, and I'm talking a few seconds, right? So it actually then declutters the atom, right? Or you can even reduce the current, which is good enough sometimes.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you.
Arun, can I ask you a question?
Yes, of course, yeah.
Okay. I know that you're familiar with the India demographic because you're from there. And you mentioned that the batteries are smaller, for your country. In the United States, I guess, there has been talk from some companies that mentioned about bidirectional, right? So, do you think like in the future, do you think for the EV space or automotive space, there's going to be a need for bidirectional, or is that just something that they're just throwing in there? Because I mean, you could take a look at it, from
Yeah.
from like even with the cell phone industries, just using a battery to basically charge something. Uh, does India have any play with that, or you guys are just not dealing with that at all?
Yeah, no, I think a couple of points here. I think great question. In India, the challenge is how do I get energy from the grid to the vehicle faster, not the other way around. Uh, and why this matters is vehicles are not actually connected to the grid. We spoke about the problem where the vehicles are not actually parked at home, or they're not parked in dedicated or organized parking spots. So you don't actually have the vehicle hooked on to the grid for extended periods of time. So you really can't depend on the vehicle storage for any sort of grid performance or grid buffering. The other reality is the price points and the sort of the directionality of battery technology, in my opinion, and this is not an India answer. I think globally, I think the sort of battery technology you would use for storage, for stationary storage, is very different from what you would want for automotive. And again, I believe that there is no one cell that works for every application, and there's no one way to build a battery for every application. And the energy management layers are very different for stationary and for automotive. So I fundamentally do not believe in vehicle to grid at all. I think you would just have different batteries that manage grid and different batteries around vehicles. And that's not that, but that's my personal.
Thank you.
Arun, quick question. Thank you so much for the presentation.
Yes.
I'm curious a little bit more about the India market. What do you think about? So you're focused on scaling the chargers. How do you think the adoption, especially for the heavy like 6-wheelers, transitioning those to EVs going in India? How do you think that's going to scale?
Yeah. If you look at buses, for example, India is already going very aggressive on electric buses. Um, just as contextually, India doesn't have petroleum, right? So India is very keen on going electric. The government's very big on it, just for self-sustenance, de-risking dependence on other countries. India is now investing in cell manufacturing quite aggressively. It's still a few years away before we have good quality cells. But we're sort of doing everything else around it, which is creating the demand, creating the vehicle manufacturers, creating the charging networks. A lot of focus there. But in every segment, the problem comes down to optimized battery sizes and charging network. Like I said, the big problem is India can't afford large batteries. So we just need to do more with less. So you need to put in a smaller battery and just clock more kilometers. And that's the fundamental problem in every segment, especially with commercial vehicle segment, because it's at the end of the day, it's numbers, it's a TCO problem. It's got to make cost sense for operators to switch. We actually have a rapid charging bus coming out later this year. We'll talk about it maybe as we speak.
Oh, sweet. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, just to sort of talk about what we've been learning on the field because of the impact of the rapid charging. Like I said, in Bangalore, there are 40 CNG stations. CNG is natural gas, so that's a type of fuel that's used very commonly in India. It's different from petrol or diesel. It's compressed natural gas. So while there are 40 stations of CNG, which is sort of the most popular fuel type of commercial vehicles, at least small commercial vehicles in India. We actually have 35 plus stations already. Now we're setting up another 70. So we'll have 100 network points in Bangalore soon. But today we do each of the network points. The great thing about setting up charging, we realize is, you can just set up a small charging station anywhere. It's super easy. A CNG station requires 6,000 square feet. A charging station requires 50 square feet. A CNG station requires close to $200,000 to invest. A charging station requires $5,000, $6,000 to invest. So just 20x, 40x more efficient, however you want to look at it. So it's just so easy to set up charging across the city, and that's why we believe, in the future, you won't go to energy will come to you, which means this is going to be such a dense network all over the place where you just find an energy point every 500 meters, tap up and keep going. Right? And that's sort of future that we want to believe. But we've taken a small step towards that. Right? And one of the big advantages we realized is, at least in cities where real estate is a big problem, it's really hard to find. Let's say you have 100 vehicles, you really need to find parking for 100 vehicles in the middle of the city, which is very expensive. Park all of them and charge all of them. And this is one of the big problems for commercial vehicle operators. I'm sure even the US as well. And that's where, using our e-pump, we're able to get operators to use far lesser real estate, which makes it really, really cost efficient. Right? And because of a full stack approach, we also accidentally solved another problem, which is network reliability. We have a 99% network reliability, which is very, very different from an open protocol. Today, when you only build it in silos, an open protocol charging network has a 70% reliability. So there's a 30% chance that you turn up and it doesn't charge, right? Just because of some software communication issue. It's 2024, and having a 30% reliability for charging is just not acceptable, right? Irrespective of speed of charging. So we realize this full stack approach also really helps with reliability, and we're sort of able to take full ownership. We know where every vehicle is in the city. We know where every network point is. So we're able to build a very good traffic management layer, which is very critical for experience, right? And what we also realized is, in India, especially with this segment, there's nothing called an daily average. Out of 30 days, we realized 5 out of 30 days, these guys are doing 200 plus kilometers. 10 out of 30 days, they're doing 120 plus kilometers. And they're averaging 120 kilometers in a day. And 10 out of the 30 days, they're not running that many kilometers. Right? So it's a very erratic segment. So sort of like on-demand logistics. These are all gig workers. If you look at food delivery or home delivery systems, they sort of use our vehicles. And so at the end of the day, mobility is truly random. Mobility is truly about freedom, flexibility, and just doing whatever you want, whenever you want. And we think we will never be able to achieve that with electric unless we solve for rapid charging. You can't answer this with larger batteries. The answer of how big a battery, the answer is it's never big enough. So you always want more. And I think the more efficient way is to just say, hey, okay, downsize batteries and give you faster charging. Right? And we now have more segments coming in. And actually, that's actually a mock-up of a bus. So this year we actually have a bus launching. This is a 1 megawatt charger, 320 kilowatt hour battery pack. It's a 15-minute rapid charging bus. And we're going to be launching that later this year.